Tonight, we're diving into terrifying Wendigo stories from Reddit. The Wendigo is one of the oldest and darkest legends tied to the forests of North America. A creature people describe as tall, starving, and not quite human. These stories were shared by people who claim they experienced something in the woods they still can't explain. If you enjoy scary Reddit stories like this, make sure to subscribe. And with that said, let's get into it. Hunted by a Wendigo. I've posted this in the Wendigo community I'm in, but I also wanted to share this here to see if anyone else has any intel that can help me, since the other community seems to be pretty quiet. I realize how unbelievable this story might be, but I assure you it's entirely true. I've had countless experiences with the supernatural since I was 4. I'm 33 now, but this is one of the most terrifying ones I've had. I've looked at some of the stories in this community to see if there's anything I haven't discovered yet. I thought that if I shared my encounter here, there might be someone who has some information that could help. Please don't comment if you don't believe in the supernatural. I've seen skeptics plastering their 2 cents on some posts. I'm looking for legitimate information. My questions are at the end of this. Thanks in advance! I had an experience with a Wendigo this fall in early October in northern Minnesota in a state forest, very close to, if not on, a reservation. I've always heard that speaking of them can draw them to you, but I hadn't thought of or listened to any Wendigo stories anytime close to my encounter. I was staying with some very dear friends, I'll call them M and C, and they have a camper in their yard by the lake for guests to sleep in. I had walked down to the camper from the house with my miniature Dachshund, Ebony, around midnight and found that I needed to set some things up, primarily the heater. By the time I was done getting everything in order, it was approximately 1:30. I never thought to lock the door because, really, I figured it's in the middle of the woods, so there was nothing to worry about. I was wrong. I had closed the curtains, thank God, and I was having trouble falling asleep because my anxiety was going mad. M and C's dogs were barking outside, and their G's wouldn't stop honking. Ebony, who usually sleeps under the covers, was sitting on my hip while I laid on my side, and I could feel her turning her head back and forth, like she was trying to track something outside. I tried tucking her under the blankets to calm her down, but she kept returning to her perch on my hip. I have no idea how long I laid there. I would say at least 40 minutes, when all of a sudden I heard M's voice outside the camper. Yeah, anybody in there. Mem, and what sounded like claws dragged down the side of the camper. I almost called back to when I realized Faye 1. She and C were both fast asleep by now, and Faye 2. M knew I was in there. She wouldn't ask if anybody was. Suddenly, I noticed everything had gone absolutely silent outside. The dogs and the birds had stopped carrying on. The gusts of wind had even stopped. It was the kind of silence you hear about in horror stories, how the woods go mute when something evil is in the area. Then another thought hit me. Ebony would be losing her shat and barking at the door if that had been anything human. She was frozen on my hip, dead, quiet, shaking. I didn't dare to move, but I was really starting to have to pee. And I remembered that I hadn't locked the door. I have no idea how long I laid there debating whether I should get up and use the bathroom and lock the door, but it felt like an eternity. In reality, I guessed it was maybe 10-15 minutes. I thought it may have been a skinwalker at first, but remembered they don't mimic the voices of your loved ones to lure you into the woods. Wendigo do. I knew these creatures, demons, whatever they are, can lure humans out of their abodes if they make eye contact with you, and everything in me was screaming to make sure I didn't look outside. I made doubly sure I didn't look through any cracks in the curtains as I walked softly to the front of the camper and very slowly turned the lock, praying and holding my breath. I made sure to keep my eyes away from the windows as I crawled back in bed and pulled Ebony close, and she finally stayed under the blankets. I snuck a peek at my phone for the time before I laid down, figuring it had to be close to 3:00 a.m., the witching hour. It was about 20:30. As soon as I laid down, the wind kicked back up and M and C's basset hounds erupted into howls as they came running down to the camper and a little ways into the trees, and the geese started their noise again. I heard the bassets come back to the camper, barking a few more times before they laid down outside the door to protect me. I didn't get out of bed again that night. I told M and C what had happened the next morning. I think I was hoping M would say she had come down to check on me and Ebony, but she confirmed what I already knew. They had gone to bed as soon as I had left the house. I said a prayer over their house, the camper, and all of us the following night and had an uneventful night. Thank God! I also spoke with another guy who's familiar with the supernatural to see if he knew any more about Wendigo. I'm not sure how accurate the information he gave me was or if it's reliable at all, but when I asked him why Ebony hadn't made a peep, I had assumed it was because she was absolutely petrified. He said a Wendigo can control animals to keep them from alerting their owners about its presence. He also told me, 1, they can't enter houses that aren't made of wood directly from the forest they're hunting in, tents and campers included, because they consist of man-made materials. 2, a lock is useless. They can unlock and open a door, so they can try to lure you outside. And 3, they typically stay in the woods, but they will come into a smaller town and never into a city. I had never heard of any of what he told me before, so again, I can't speak for accuracy, but I also haven't researched the claims either. He also advised me never to go outside to pee at night if I ever go camping, and to bring a bucket or something to use, and to make sure that I always close tent flaps and curtains before falling asleep. He said if the flaps are open so you can see outside, the Wendigo can make eye contact with you and draw you out. After leaving M and C's to go to my father's house for a few days, I had the distinct feeling of being watched when I took Ebony outside after dark. My father lives 3 hours away from M and C, but his house is in the country. I told myself it was only the fear from the experience and what I know about the Wendigo triggering an overactive imagination. I never heard anything, and I watched Ebony's behavior very closely, and she didn't act like she had in the camper. I'm moving back to that area from Canada, and this experience has been weighing heavily on my mind. I've been trying to find any information about warding them off, or if they have a home hunting range like cougars do, or if they move on from a region. My prayers did work the second night, so I figure I can pray over the property. I also have holy water that I can use, since the Wendigo is an evil spirit that possesses people or physically manifests. Frustratingly, a majority of what comes up in searches is utter garbage like Wikipedia. Does anyone know if a Wendigo stays in one area? Are my concerns about it coming back when I get moved into my cabin warranted, or am I worrying excessively? Do you have any tips for warding them off? An encounter with a Wendigo. At 1 minute to midnight, I took out the shot glass and put it beside the bottle of J. Germister. I don't drink anymore after what happened to Pop. The one exception is the first day of September. The house is dark, except for the warm glow of the 3 bulbs above the dining room table. I rub my tongue against the inside of my cheek. My mouth always goes dry. The only sound is the incessant ticking of the wall-mounted clock. At midnight, the soft bell sounds, a miniature version of church bells. I fill the glass and hold it aloft for a second and swallow with a deep breath. The subtle burn wends its way into my throat and stomach. I wash the shot glass by the light of the moon shining through the kitchen window. Loretta wouldn't mind my drinking, but a used shot glass beside the sink raises questions. And I never like to talk about it. All these years later, I still have nightmares. What I saw up on that mountain left a greater impression than any other event in my life. More than my children being born and my father drinking himself into an early grave. Loretta tells me I should talk about it, that it would help. She might be right. She always is. So here goes. I joined the park rangers service right out of school, and it was a perfect fit. I took to academics like a fish to the desert, and the outdoors always called. I passed my time in school daydreaming of the weekend and hiking or fly fishing with Pop. In the summer of '89, I was stationed in the Appalachians. Our jurisdiction encompassed trails leading all the way up the mountain. Up there, the spruce thin out and clouds hang heavy even in fine weather at the base. I spent the summer clearing fallen branches from the walking trails after a couple of vicious storms over the winter. It was hack work reserved for the junior, but the truth of it was I didn't mind. The peak of the summer heat was spent and visitor numbers dropped as the weather began to turn. Persistent drizzle had kept me desk-bound for the morning, and we were about to get lunch when he burst through the door. He let out a moan and collapsed to the floor. Stanley leaned down and propped him in a seated position. Water dripped from his shoulder-length hair. His limbs hung limp by his side. I handed Stanley a cup of water. Stanley used his index finger to push down his chin. When the water hit his tongue, the man tensed and his eyelids flicked open. He flailed his limbs and knocked the glass from Stanley's hand. The glass shattered on the floor, but the man paid it no mind. "It is out there," he said. "What is?" The man half turned and gripped Stanley's shirt and made balls with his fists. He repeated himself, pausing after each word. It is out there. He started to sob. He released his grip on Stanley and buried his face in his hands. We lifted him onto a chair and he pressed his face against the table and bawled. I grabbed the rucksack he had dropped to the floor. On the bottom right was a name tag behind a plastic sleeve. Lenny Porter from San Diego. There was a number at the bottom. I'll make the call, Stanley said. When Stanley returned, Lenny was sat up staring blankly at the wall with red eyes. His face was gaunt, like he hadn't eaten in a week. Stanley closed the door. I spoke to your father. Lenny didn't acknowledge the words. He sat motionless and unblinking. Stanley shuffled across to where I was sitting and pressed his palms on the table. Lenny left San Diego 2 weeks ago with a couple of friends. They planned to spend a month hiking the trail north. The father gave me 2 names, Freddie and Sabrina. When he heard their names, Lenny leaned over and picked up his backpack. He rummaged frantically until he pulled out a stack of Polaroids. He flicked through the photographs and then slapped one on the table. Stanley and I leaned over. Flanking a fitter and healthier Lenny were what must have been Freddie, tall and wearing a baseball cap, and Sabrina, shorter and wearing a bright yellow top with an almost fluorescent blue belt pulling the fabric tight around her waist. Lenny fingered the photo and tears welled in his eyes. What happened to them? He sobbed and shook his head. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Stanley took a map down from the wall and pushed it in front of Lenny. We are here. Where did you last see them? Lenny blinked away tears and concentrated. He squinted at the map and pressed his index finger down and tapped it. Stanley took a pencil from his breast pocket and marked the map with a cross. I'll notify the police. Get the truck ready to go. During training, they told us about search and rescue operations. The Rangers are the first responders. It was part of the job. Twisted ankles and wandering off the trail and getting lost are not uncommon and no reason to get the police involved. But this felt different. I secured the gear in the truck and Stanley appeared, flanked by a police officer in his early 30s. Harry is hitching a ride. His partner will take care of Lenny. We drove up the trail for about 15 minutes with the truck until it grew too narrow and treacherous. We split up the gear between us and set out on foot. Our destination was high up the mountain and far away from the trails. It was almost as if the trails deliberately avoided the area. We hacked our way through the thick forest. How had they ended up all the way out here? Stanley checked his watch constantly as we climbed. He wanted to get there before dark. I figured we would be lucky if we did. Stanley and Harry talked like old friends, asking about each other's wives and children. The park rangers are in effect an extension of law enforcement. It made sense to be friendly with the police, and living in a small mountain town made it almost inevitable. I like that. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Stanley checked the map. Almost there. Get your torches? All right. Harry reached into his backpack and pulled out a flashlight. I did the same. Do you know what's up this way? Stanley said. I shook my head. Somewhere up here is an old cabin. Hunters used it as a base back when you could still hunt up this way. The cross our friend Lenny put on the map is just about on top of it. Let's see if we can get there before there's no light left. We didn't make it by dark. Twilight gave to night with little warning. Soon we were relying on the light from our torches. Being on a trail in the sunshine lends a sense of security up here, even when you are alone. Now, surrounded by black and with the trail long behind us, an uneasiness grew in my stomach for the first time. Stanley paused and swept his torch. He muttered something under his breath. Harry took a few steps to the right, lowering his head and squinting. There it is, he said. At the farthest reaches of Harry's torchlight, the cabin emerged from the woods. Stanley tapped Harry on the shoulder. My eyes aren't what they used to be. The cabin should have been a source of comfort, but it only added to my unease. The roof was half caved in and trees encroached on all sides, gnarled branches reaching out like fingers. The structure looked like it belonged more to the forest than to man. The only door hung askew on warped and rusted hinges. 2 windows had long ago lost their glass. Stanley shouldered open the door with a grunt. Leaves and branches covered the floor, blown in through the open windows and roof. We dumped the gear inside. Stanley took out a lantern and tied it to a horizontal branch a few paces from the front door. He flicked it on and the light shone bright. If there was anyone lost nearby, they could not fail to see it. We split up and entered the forest, guided by our torches. Stanley instructed us to go no further than the reach of the lantern. It was our lighthouse on the horizon. The wind blew and fresh from the north. I buttoned up my jacket against the cold. The beam from the torch was strong, but aside from the narrow cone of light, the forest was a deep and full dark. Stanley and Harry called out the names of the two missing Freddie and Sabrina. I did the same. Every few steps I stopped and listened. The forest was alive with the scurrying of animals and insects going about their business, and the constant rustling of the wind through the leaves. It was hopeless. This was needle in the haystack stuff. Freddie or Sabrina could be unconscious on the ground a few feet to my left, and I would never see them. We should camp and wait for first light. Harry's voice cut through the night louder and with urgency. I skipped towards the sound as fast as I dared. The two torchlights of Harry and Stanley played close together, the beams of light trained on the forest floor. "You might not want to see this," Stanley said as I came up behind them. It was too late. By the light of the torches, I saw him, flat on his back, arms and legs bent at unnatural angles. I almost gagged when I saw his face. The left side caved in, a red, bloody mess fragmented with the white of the skull. The right side was intact, one green eye staring up, wide and unblinking. The remainder of the face had an almost serene expression. It was not the look of fear that you would expect from someone about to have half their face crushed. No skin remained below the neck, the contents of his torso picked so clean I could see his full spine. "What did that?" I stammered. I didn't get an answer. Stanley fished the Polaroid from his pocket and studied it under the torchlight. He handed it to Harry. "It's him. It's Freddie?" Harry jumped and swung his torch out into the woods. "I swear I heard someone talking out there," Harry said. "We've been calling out their names too." "No, it wasn't that. It sounded like whispering. It's the wind through the trees." Harry didn't look convinced. He called out the name of Sabrina and listened. Only the sounds of the forest. Stanley shushed him. "There's nothing we can do for the boy now. Let's get back to the cabin and radio down the news." Stanley took a few quick steps towards the cabin and motioned for us to follow. He seemed agitated. I didn't blame him. I followed on his heels. Harry lingered, searching the woods with his torch until he too fell in behind. The inside of the cabin felt like a sanctuary. Out of the wind and removed from the mangled corpse of Freddie, my mind processed the sight. I had gutted my fair share of fish, but this was different. I put my hand to my stomach and swallowed hard. I was overcome with a compulsion to repeat my unanswered question. What could have done that? Before I could, Harry gave us some more bad news. There was no response on the radio, only static. It wasn't surprising. The cabin sat in a depression between the peak we crested on our way in and the taller peak beyond. "We have to go back," I said. Harry shook his head. "Not in the dark and not when there's someone still out there." "We don't know if that girl is dead or alive," Stanley said. "I heard her." "You heard a whisper, is what you said. And if she was there, she would have come to the light. She'll come to the lantern and we'll wait for her." Harry threw out his arms in protest. Stanley sighed. "If she's dead, then we'll find her in the light of morning. If she's alive and nearby enough to whisper in our ears, then she'll come to us." Two rectangles of light shone through the open windows from the lantern outside, but the front room of the cabin still had dark, shadowy corners. Stanley took a second lantern and tied it to an old light fixture hanging from the ceiling. The room lit up as if under sunlight, but a cold light that gave the room a bare and unwelcome feel. I busied myself clearing a space on the floor beside the black pot-belly stove at the rear of the room. Stanley and Harry stood as statues, staring up at the wall behind me. I turned. Etched in black suit onto the blank wall was some kind of monster, long-limbed and with an elongated skull. It stared back at us through white blobs left clear of black. I took a step back and almost stumbled. "What is that?" I didn't need an answer. "You don't live and work up in the mountains here without hearing the stories. Stories told dismissively by daylight, like you would talk about the monsters you imagined hiding in your closet as a kid. By night and around a campfire, the stories take on a graver tone, and the name of the monster is only ever whispered. Wendigo. Of course, I had never seen one. But if I had to imagine what one might look like, the painting and suit taking up the full height of the wall of the cabin was an exact match. I waited for one of the two men behind me to dismiss what we saw drawn on the wall, to make light of it and crack a joke. Neither did. Stanley uttered a simple instruction. No one goes outside without a weapon. Our shadows danced on the walls. The lantern hanging from the ceiling did not move. Stanley leaned and looked out the window. The lantern hanging from the tree branch swung back and forth like the pendulum of a grandfather clock. There was wind tonight, but not enough to do that. Stanley bent down and fished a rifle from the bag. My heart beat like a drum in my ears. And then something else, whispers. What sounded like the whispers of a girl, entreating us, inviting us out into the darkness of the forest. Stanley inched open the door with the muzzle of his rifle. He stepped through the gap and watched the lantern on the tree come to a rest. He stood beside the lantern and searched the corners of the forest illuminated by the light. Nothing moved. Harry unclipped the leather strap on his belt and drew a pistol and went to the doorway. I felt naked and exposed with my hands empty. I took a step backwards, the Wendigo drawn in suit looming large behind and burning a hole in the back of my head. A shadow flashed through the trees and Stanley swung the muzzle of the rifle and shot, the crack piercing the night. He raised the rifle to his shoulder and flicked it from side to side, searching for movement. The lantern boobed up and down. With a rush, a long-limbed creature dropped onto Stanley from above. He screamed and wrenched the rifle around, but had it knocked from his grip. Harry fired 2 shots and the creature let out a wail. It bounded towards the door and Harry slammed it shut. He pointed the pistol to the closed door and emptied the chamber. Harry took a step back and shot me a glance. Through the whole ordeal, I had not moved. I had barely breathed. Was it dead? Was Stanley okay? The window, I screamed. The long, thin fingers of the creature wrapped themselves around the inside of the window frame. Then the head appeared uncannily human, but distorted and disfigured. The chin elongated and the teeth like razors and drenched in blood, its eyes white and piercing, just like the etching on the wall. Harry grabbed me by the arm and hauled me into the back room of the cabin. He slammed shut the flimsy door. The back room was windowless, and the only light was a thin strip at the base from the lantern in the front room. We crouched together, our shoulders pressed against the door. We listened, the light patter of footsteps. 2 thin strips of black interrupted the strip of light at the base of the door. Something stood on the other side. "Come out, it is okay." It sounded like Stanley. Had he killed it? "Come out." Harry straightened, and I grabbed his shoulder. "Don't open the door," I whispered. "They say a Wendigo can imitate those it kills." My hand brushed against Harry's back and knocked the flashlight from his jacket pocket. I fumbled in the darkness until I found it, and I flicked it on. I scanned the room for something, anything we could use as a weapon. I walked away from the door and kicked at the twigs and leaves on the floor. All that was good for was kindling. Something smelled rotten. There must be a dead rat somewhere. "It's Stanley," Harry said. I pointed the torch to him. His eyes were wide and wild. He must have killed it. He smiled at me and took a step back. The door slammed open and carried with it the rotten stench. What stood in the doorway was not Stanley, but the Wendigo. Harry kneeled before it, breathing in the noxious fumes. I shone the torch onto the creature, its gray skin pulled tight on a gaunt frame. And then something glinted, a belt buckle. Around the creature's waist was the bright blue belt Sabrina wore in the Polaroid. "Sabrina," I said. It turned to me and paused, tilting its head to the side. I thought I saw a glimmer of recognition, a brief moment where it knew the name. But then it snarled, its mouth opening wide and dripping with saliva. It wrapped 2 hands around the neck of Harry and leaned in. I acted instinctively, without thinking. I jumped at the creature, swinging the only weapon I had, the torch. I brought it down on its head with all the strength and adrenaline I had. It bucked and sent me flying into the front room beyond. I threw out my hands against the fall and grabbed the lantern Stanley had hung from the ceiling. It could not bear my weight, and the cord pulled out from the ceiling and I fell with a thud. I jumped up at a burst of warmth from my stomach. The lantern had smashed on impact and the white-hot filament broke free of its casing. I groaned in pain and the creature lumbered forwards. I retreated into the corner of the room and pulled my knees up to my chest. It stood over me and opened its mouth, razor-sharp teeth gleaming white, then the smell of smoke. The creature hopped and then scrambled backwards. The leaves and twigs covering the floor ignited under the heat from the lamp filament. A small flame burst up and the creature covered its face. Fire. It didn't like fire. I crawled forwards and swept as much of the kindling as I could grab onto the flames. The fire grew and the creature screamed. As smoke filled the room, it coughed and spluttered. It made one last effort to come at me and then retreated out of the room and into the forest. I went to the back room and grabbed Harry. We stumbled out of the cabin, the fire now spreading up the walls and to the roof. Stanley lay below, the lantern hung from the tree, unmoving and with a chunk of flesh missing from his throat. We ran into the forest in the opposite direction the creature had gone. We first climbed up to the crest and then back down the mountain. We stumbled our way down by the light of the torch. Adrenaline coursed through our veins, and we imagined that thing right behind us, stalking us in the dark. When we finally crossed a trail, we followed it back down to the ranger station. A team of police and National Guard hiked up to the cabin after the sun rose. The cabin had burned to the ground, the pot-belly stove the only item that survived the blaze. The bodies of Stanley and Freddie were brought down. They said Stanley's flesh had been picked clean down to the skeleton. That was the first day of September 1989. Sabrina was listed as a missing person, and her father spent a month in the mountains searching for her. But she's gone in every sense that matters. Turned to a Wendigo by hunger for human flesh, she transformed into something unrecognizable from where it began. Around campfires, people still tell stories of the Wendigo. I don't know if they truly believe they are out there, but I know I have seen it. Sometimes there really is a monster in the closet. The time I had an encounter with a Wendigo. To preface, I'm not the person who throws ish around like this lightly. I'm mostly posting this out of curiosity of other people's experiences with Wendigos cryptids. I'm not even sure if what my sister and I experienced was a Wendigo, but I'll let you decide that for yourself. This is also a long read, so I've 23 female, always had creepy paranormal experiences, but when I'm with my sister, 25 female, the dial goes up to 10 on the creep factor. So anyway, a couple of months back, my sister and I had to drive up to Colorado on a family emergency. Specifically, we were driving to Dellen, Colorado. The drive up was pretty normal and nothing weird started to happen until we got right outside of Leadville. That's when things took a turn for the decidedly strange. You can believe me or not about what I'm about to say, but even though it was late at night, I know I'm not crazy and my sister saw all of this too. So we're driving and it's pitch black outside. There's very little street lamps, so the only things we can see are illuminated by the headlights. My sister is driving and I'm in the passenger seat. At this point in the drive, we had only a few more hours until Dillon, and we were determined to stick it out no matter what, despite the fact we'd been driving for nearly 12 hours at this point. Looking back, I kind of wished we'd had some common sense and found a hotel and never driven on this road at this time of night. It's about 9. My sister has the radio going. I'm staring out the window, trying to stay awake when all of a sudden my sister slammed on her brakes. Now, for context, my sister is a cabbie. There's not a whole hell of a lot that would make her slam on the brakes like that. So when she did, I was automatically on full alert, wondering what the hell just happened. Before I can even ask her what made her slam on the brakes, she's telling me to look up. No shit. Standing in the middle of the opposite lane on this deserted 2-lane road is a big as fuck coyote. Bigger than any coyote I've ever seen. Not that unusual, except that it was just staring at us, not the car. At us, it was making full-on dead-ass eye contact with us. Obviously creeped out, I told my sister to just floor it because I didn't like the eerie, almost intelligent way that coyote had been looking at us. As we passed it, I forced my eyes forward so I wouldn't have to look at it. We kept driving, a little shook up but laughing it off. After all, we're both from the Southwest, and there's no way a lone coyote is gonna spook us that bad. A little bit further down the road, I'm calmed down again and back to staring out the window. Maybe 5 more minutes pass before I hear my sister ask me, "Did you see that?" Thinking she's messing with me, I'm like, "No, see what?" As I turn to look at her, I can see she's spooked. Believe me, it takes a lot to spook her, so I was immediately concerned. She sees that I have no clue what she's talking about, so she says, "Dude, there was a hand, it just came up out of the back seat and touched the dash." Now I'm even more creeped out. I try to make a joke out of it, saying how it's late and the whole thing with the coyote, but she's insistent on what she saw. So I ask her to replicate it. She gestures to the back seat and says, "I saw a hand come up and touch the dash like this." At this, she makes a fist and taps it against the dash. I shake my head, tell her I didn't see anything, that we should just keep going, cause I sure as a hell am not turning back now. But oh man, that was not the end of it. Not even 10 minutes later, we're still driving on this dark, windy mountain road. I'm looking forward, fully awake now, and doing my best to take my mind off the situation, when I happen to glance out the driver's side of the front windshield. Again, on the opposite side of the road, I see a woman standing on the edge of the road. She's all alone and just standing there in a torn white dress and barefoot. Obviously thinking that this girl needs help, I open my mouth to ask my sister to stop. Before I can get the words out, we're already around the next bend, and as I look in the rear view mirror to check, if she's still there, the girl is just gone. Vanished. Poof. I'm really freaking at this point, and I just want to get to our hotel. Thankfully, a few minutes later, we were in Leadville itself, which, TB, at around 10-11 at night was just as creepy, if not more. I dreaded when we got to the outskirts of town and had to go back onto that lonely mountain highway. Mind you, we're still alone. We haven't seen another car in over an hour, which makes this next part even creepier somehow. So, a few miles on the other side of Leadville, I feel my sister grab my arm. Again, she asks that dreaded question, "Did you see that?" I say no, obviously. I'm keeping my eyes on my side of the vehicle and have no idea what she's talking about. So she says, and honestly, after what happened, after this, I completely believe her, that she saw breath on the outside of the windshield. Not the inside, the outside. Like someone outside the vehicle had breathed on the glass. I'm really glad that I didn't see that because I would have turned the car around. But at this point, we're both like, fuck it, we're almost there, we can hold out until Dylan. So, like dumb idiots in a horror movie, we kept driving. I don't know distance-wise how far away this is from Leadville, but we came up to a weird parking lot area at a bend in the road. I think it was a hotel or something. I'm not too familiar with the area, but it was weird seeing a parking lot and actual lights in the middle of BFE, Colorado. I'm saying this to tell you that as we approached this place, we saw oncoming headlights. Now, mind you, this was the first car we'd seen in a long time, but if there was this weird lit up building out there and Leadville only a few miles behind us, it wouldn't be that strange to see a car heading the other direction. Except the car didn't go in the direction we thought. No, we both saw the lights of this car, and we both saw it drive parallel to the road and disappear. Now we're for sure thinking we're hallucinating and making jokes about aliens, saying how that was a flying saucer, and we could tally that to the list of weird things we'd seen, with not much options left but to drive we keep going. But man, that's when things started getting really bad. The longer we're driving, the more freaked my sister looks. At one point, she tells me that the lane lines are disappearing. As in, she can't tell the difference between one lane line and the other. On a 2-lane mountain road. You can blame this on fatigue, but my sister drives a cab for a living. She wakes up at 2 a.m. to go to work most days. There's no freaking way, no matter how tired she is, that she's hallucinating the lane lines not being there. I can see them just fine, but she swears up and down that she can't see lanes on either side. I think it was only her experience as a cab driver that saved our asses. Now, this next part is going to sound insane, and I don't blame anyone for not believing me. I wouldn't believe me if I didn't experience it myself. So, we got the lane lines disappearing, cars disappearing off the road, weird shit breathing on the windshield, and the icing on this cake is that now it feels like the car is doing a free fall down the mountain. No, not like we're out of control. Like there's an invisible force pushing us from behind and trying to make us go down the mountain faster. My sister is riding the brakes like hell, and I'm trying to figure out why it feels like we're in free fall when we're on a less than 20-degree slope. It makes no sense. And as I'm thinking this, I hear my sister ask me, "Hey, is it windy outside?" I shake my head, check my phone, and am like, no, there's no wind outside at all. In the car, you would have been able to hear the wind and feel it pushing on all sides, not just the back. Wind makes a very distinctive noise, and so I know that there wasn't any wind that night. That doesn't explain, however, why when my sister told me to look at the trees on either side of the road, they were swaying, bending back and forth like there's a storm outside. But there's no storm. There's no wind, no clouds, nothing. Nothing that could explain why these trees are moving like this. I'm really freaked out now, and I start to pray. I'm religious to a point, and I'm not ashamed to say that I pray when I get scared like this, and I was terrified. Because underneath all of the crazy, this strange, eerie feeling was creeping up on me. It felt like there was something in the woods watching us. The trees felt almost alive, and there was just a darkness. I don't know how else to explain it. It was just evil. It felt evil and wrong, and I just did not want to be there anymore. I started praying harder and told my sister to drive as fast as she could away from that place, which TB with everything going on wasn't that fast. For some reason, I just keep repeating, there's something bad here, something bad happened here, I don't like it, saying that over and over again. So, of course, my sister asks, what do I mean and why do I keep saying that? Now, I'm not sure if I'm a medium, but I would consider myself a sensitive. I can pick up on the energy of spirits and places. So, like a dumbass, I open myself up to whatever the fuck this thing is. I can hear my sister asking me what happened. And the word that came out of my mouth in an inhuman guttural growl was murder. That voice was not my voice. That thing was not human. As soon as that word left my mouth, I burst into tears. I was so scared. I clutched my Mary medallion and I held my sister's hand. I made her pray the prayer of Saint Michael with me. And when we were praying, it was almost like she couldn't get the words out, like, Udke. Something was trying to stop her from praying. I haven't been that scared of something paranormal in a very long time, and I never, ever want to drive that stretch of road at night ever again. Could we have been hallucinating? Sure. But Ike, this next part somehow creeps me out even more. So, we're at the hotel now, and we're in our room, both talking about how crazy that all was. When my sister says, "You didn't see it, did you?" And of course, I'm like, see what? She tells me and I believe her because she was dead serious. My sister can't lie if her life depended upon it because she just starts laughing. It's her tell. That's how I knew she at least believed what she saw. She told me that she saw a skeletal figure, like a human figure in the woods. It was all bone with like rotten flesh hanging off it. Even though its body was human, she said that it had the head of a deer and like glowing red eyes. She looked so scared, I don't know how I couldn't have believed her. According to my sister, she saw this thing tailing the car the moment we both noticed the trees moving, so about halfway or a third of the way down. Needless to say, I was pretty glad that she told me that after we got to the hotel. Now, one last thing before I wrap this up. So, my stepmom is from the Denver area and just so happened to have family in Dillon. I casually asked her if she'd ever experienced anything weird on that road, and I didn't even have to tell her which one for her to know the road I was talking about. She said when she was a kid it used to freak the hell out of her. She can remember falling asleep in the car, and then whenever they got to that stretch of road, automatically waking up because she was too scared to sleep. And the thing about the car driving parallel to the road. Well, my stepmom said, and I haven't confirmed this, so take this with a grain of salt, that the roads used to be built differently back in the day. That they would have run parallel to the mountain and not alongside it. She also told me a story of when she was a teenager about how there was a time she and her dad were driving on the road at night. She's in the passenger seat for context. She remembers looking up and seeing oncoming headlights in their lane, screaming and then throwing her hands up out of reflex. Her dad swerves, almost crashes, and then asks her what's wrong. My stepmom, confused, asks him if he saw that car just now, and he says no, of course. TB, that just confirmed it for me. Oh, and the whole thing about that weird voice. My sister said that when I spoke in that tone, it was about 2 octaves deeper than my natural voice, completely flat and absolutely not human. Me and my sister both agree that whatever that entity was that she saw was absolutely trying to harm, if not kill us. We both think that it was screwing with her about the lane lines and trying to push us off the mountain. For what purpose, I still don't know, but I honestly don't think I want to. We also agreed that all the freaky shit we saw before was something trying to warn us. The primary reason. That hand with a fist in sign language can mean stop. I think it's possible those other entities were trying to tell us to turn around. Too bad we didn't listen, lol. But anyway, that's my story of a possible encounter with a Wendigo and other things that go bump in the night. I never have and never will again drive the road between Leadville and Dillon at night or any other time. So I'm just curious. Has anyone else had an experience like this there? Or an experience like this in general? The time I saw a Wendigo. First things first, this happened to me when I was around 10. I've lived in Idaho all my life and spent a lot of time outside or in the wilderness as a kid. My grandparents would take me camping and my older brother, and I'd always hike up whatever trails we could find to get a view of the sunset. On one of these occasions, something terrifying happened. We were up at a campsite I only know as Warm River. The river there never freezes over, and my brother and I were on a regular evening hike. There was an old tunnel bored through the mountain at one part of the trail, probably an old train tunnel, and we were walking through it when I heard something I'll never forget. After walking through, probably 2/3 of the way through the tunnel, I heard a terrible screech at the end we entered through. The screech wasn't like anything I've heard before. I've heard the screams of animals on dark and windy nights. I even think I've heard Bigfoot calls a few times, but never the metallic, grinding screech I heard that day. The point is, whatever the sound was, it did not sound natural in any capacity. I probably jumped 5 feet in the air when I heard it, and my brother shouted a few choice curses before shooing me quickly to the exit of the tunnel. At this point, my brother decided we should just continue walking and head back after whatever made the noise hopefully cleared out. We didn't have any firearms on us, so I was pretty upset. My brother reassured me we would be fine, and we made the walk back without incident. However, I didn't get any sleep that night. Whether it was the thing that screeched at us or just my imagination, I heard things moving around the campsite the whole night, as well as whispers echoing through the darkness outside the trailer. I woke my brother up a few times to check out what it was, but he refused each time, telling me that it was probably just other campers staying up late and enjoying themselves. The rest of the trip was pretty normal. We packed up the following day, and my life continued as normal. I was disconcerted but chalked what happened up as a harmless event that I must have been exaggerating in retrospect. A few weeks later, I went up to Pine Basin, an old ski lodge my family rented each year for family reunions. Here I would mess around with my cousins, our favorite activities being night games. We would play hide and seek, a game called Ghosts in the Graveyard, and other games like that. On one instance, I was chosen to be the seeker for a hide and seek game. Because I was one of the younger cousin, I got a flashlight as an advantage. Normally, all the younger cousins hid close to the lodge, and the older cousins hid in the nearby trees or at the base of the nearby mountain. As I was searching near the bottom of the mountain, I heard a familiar whistle up the mountain a bit. We would always whistle as a hint at our locations. It sounded like someone was hiding way up near a tree known as the underwear tree. You can guess why, so I began trekking up toward the whistle. As I climbed closer, I got an uneasy feeling in my stomach. I continued on warily and convinced myself that I would be fine. I hated walking in the night alone, but figured whoever I find would walk me back to the lodge. As I neared the tree, I noticed that it was deathly silent. This alerted me that something was very wrong because you could always hear the adults having fun back at the lodge. I was anxious to hurry back, so I called out, "I found you, Scott." I thought the whistle was my older cousin's "come back down with me." I got no reply, but I wasn't planning on waiting. As I began walking back down the path, I heard a voice call, "You almost had me," so I ran back up to investigate. I flashed my light in the branches of the tree and saw a monstrosity that was not my cousin. It looked like a poorly drawn stick figure made into a human with its emaciated figure and lifeless eyes. I remember its face looked like the skin on its head was being pulled from behind. It had torn and stretched features. As soon as I saw the creature, I screamed, dropped the flashlight, and ran back to the lodge. The entire time I ran, I was overcome by an overpowering smell, and I could hear the thing running after me. As I approached the camp, I saw a few people, my cousins, at the bottom of the mountain waiting for me. I was crying and shaking, and they took me inside. I told my dad what happened, but my cousins all said they didn't see anything following me. The adults kept us inside for the night, and I kept hearing sounds drifting in from the mountains. I never played night games after that happened, and was always terrified that my cousins wouldn't listen to my warnings. Ever since that night, I have always felt uneasy up in those mountains. I used to be really religious and figured it was a demon of some kind trying to kill me or something like that, but those mountains have never felt the same after that incident. A few years ago, the game, Until Dawn, became really popular, and I watched a walkthrough of it on YouTube. When the Wendigo first appeared in-game, I got chills down my spine. It was exactly what I saw, and I did a ton of research on them. I figure someone must have gotten snowed in at that old lodge and resorted to cannibalism, but that doesn't explain what happened at Warm River. I still hear that screech from time to time. It never occurred to me until watching Until Dawn that they might be from the same thing, and it scares the hell out of me every time. I heard it earlier tonight, and that's why I decided to finally write my story down. Wish me luck, Reddit. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up today's video. Let me know what you thought about these Wendigo stories down in the comments. and if you'd like to see more creature encounters next. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more terrifying Reddit stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.